Before you really hit play, write this in the comments. Some memories are stronger than time itself. It sounds simple, but it's going to make sense. This isn't just another story. This is something that might shake what you believe about memory, death, and the connections that bind souls across lifetimes. Maybe you felt it too, that strange déjà vu, that inexplicable knowledge of places you've never been, people you've never met, that feeling that some part of you lived before this moment. But what if I told you that sometimes forgetting isn't the end of remembering? This story has layers, twists that will make you question everything you thought you knew about life and death. And maybe, somewhere in the middle of it, you'll recognize something deeper than coincidence. And even when you think you've seen the most incredible part, wait, what happens in the final moments will change everything you thought the story was about. If this journey moves something inside you, hit that like button and subscribe. This isn't just about watching, it's about feeling, questioning, and being part of something that goes beyond the screen. Now, let me tell you about a 4-year-old who drew architectural blueprints of the Eiffel Tower with impossible precision and spoke of a man named Gustav as if they were old friends.
At 4 years old, I began drawing the Eiffel Tower with a precision that amazed my parents. But it wasn't just a drawing, it was a memory. When historians confirmed that my construction details were impossible for a child to know, my family faced a truth that would change our lives forever. I had lived before, and I had a mission to fulfill. The first time I drew the tower, I was sitting at the kitchen table with my box of crayons scattered around me like fallen leaves. My mother, Sarah, was making breakfast when she heard me humming, a melody she'd never taught me, something that sounded almost ancient. "What are you drawing, sweetheart?" she asked, glancing over my shoulder as she stirred scrambled eggs. I didn't look up from my paper. My small fingers gripped the brown crayon with unusual precision as I sketched intricate lattice work that seemed to flow from my mind without effort. "My tower," I said simply, as if it were the most obvious thing in the world. Sarah's spoon stopped stirring. On the paper before me wasn't the typical stick figure creation of a 4-year-old. Instead, she saw detailed architectural drawings, iron beams intersecting at perfect angles, rivets placed with mathematical precision, and structural elements that seemed impossibly sophisticated for a child who'd barely learned to write her own name. "Emma, where did you learn to draw like this?" Her voice carried a note of concern that I didn't understand then. I finally looked up at her with eyes that seemed older than my years. "Gustav taught me. He was my friend." A chill ran down Sarah's spine. We lived in small-town Ohio. I had never been to Paris, never seen the Eiffel Tower except perhaps in picture books, yet the drawing before her contained details that she, even as an educated woman, didn't recognize. That evening when my father Michael came home from work, Sarah showed him the drawing. He knelt beside my chair, his tie loosened from a long day at the law firm. "Emma, tell Daddy about your tower." I pointed to different sections of my drawing with the confidence of an experienced engineer. "This is where the elevator cables run, and here," I tapped a small area near the base, "this is where the foundation needs extra support because of the wind load." Michael and Sarah exchanged glances over my head. Wind load? Foundation support? These weren't concepts in any children's book they had read to me. "And Gustav?" Michael asked gently. "Oh, he's wonderful. He has kind eyes and always smells like metal and coffee. He worries too much about the calculations, but I tell him it will be beautiful. People will come from all over the world to see it." That night, after I was asleep, my parents sat in their bedroom whispering anxiously. "It's probably just her imagination," Michael said, but his voice lacked conviction. Sarah held the drawing in her trembling hands. "Mike, look at these details. This isn't imagination, this is knowledge. Over the following weeks, I continued drawing towers, bridges, and architectural marvels with increasing complexity. I spoke often of Gustav, describing his appearance, his mannerisms, even his concerns about public criticism of our project. But it was the dreams that truly frightened my parents. Dreams where I would wake up crying, calling out for someone named Marguerite, reaching toward empty air as if trying to touch a face that existed only in my sleeping mind.
3 weeks later, Sarah sat in Dr. Patricia Kellerman's office, watching our family pediatrician flip through my drawings with increasing bewilderment. The afternoon sun filtered through Venetian blinds, casting shadows across the detailed architectural sketches spread across her mahogany desk. "These are remarkable, Sarah," Dr. Kellerman said, adjusting her reading glasses. "But I have to admit, this is far outside my expertise. Emma's physical and cognitive development appears perfectly normal for her age, but these drawings—" She paused, studying a particularly complex diagram of iron framework. Has she been exposed to engineering materials, construction sites, educational programs about architecture? Sarah shook her head. "Nothing, Patricia. We've rocked our brains trying to figure out where this could come from. She's never shown interest in building blocks or construction toys. She prefers dolls and picture books about animals." "And the names she mentions, Gustave and Marguerite?" "We've never met anyone by those names. We don't even know any French people." Sarah's voice cracked slightly. "Last night, she woke up screaming that the iron is too cold and that Marguerite will worry if I'm late. She was inconsolable for hours." Dr. Kellerman leaned back in her chair, her professional demeanor softening. "Sarah, I'm going to recommend something unusual. There's a colleague of mine at Ohio State University, Dr. James Morrison, who specializes in childhood psychology and, well, unusual cases. But first, I think you should consult with an expert in the field Emma seems so familiar with." "An expert?" "An architectural historian. Someone who can tell you if these drawings contain real historical knowledge or if they're just sophisticated but random creations." That evening, Michael researched online while I played quietly in the living room, humming that same mysterious melody that had become my constant companion. After several hours of searching, he found Dr. Marie Dupois, a French historian at the Sorbonne who specialized in 19th century architecture, particularly the construction of the Eiffel Tower. "It's a long shot," Michael told Sarah as they watched me carefully arrange my crayons in a precise pattern that somehow resembled the structural supports of a bridge. "But she's published extensively on Gustave Eiffel and his team. If anyone would know whether Emma's knowledge is real or imagined." Sarah nodded, though her hands trembled as she picked up the phone. The international call took several attempts to connect, and when Dr. Dubois finally answered, her English was accented but clear. "Bonjour, this is Marie Dubois." "Dr. Dubois, this may sound strange, but I'm calling from Ohio about my 4-year-old daughter. She's been drawing detailed plans of the Eiffel Tower and speaking about someone named Gustave as if she knew him personally." There was a long pause. "May I ask what specific details she includes in these drawings?" Sarah described my sketches, mentioning the precision of the ironwork, the placement of supports, even my comments about wind resistance and foundation concerns. Another pause, longer this time. "Mrs. Wellington, Sarah Wellington. Mrs. Wellington, I must tell you that what you're describing sounds like knowledge that would only be available to someone intimately familiar with the original construction plans that weren't made fully public until decades after the tower's completion." Dr. Dubois' voice carried a note of scientific curiosity mixed with disbelief. "Would it be possible for you to scan and email me these drawings?"
Of course, I would examine them and respond within 48 hours. But I must warn you, if your daughter's drawings contain the level of historical accuracy you suggest, we may be dealing with something far more extraordinary than childhood imagination. As Sarah hung up the phone, I looked up from my crayons with those unnaturally knowing eyes. Mama, when are we going to see Gustav's tower? I asked, as if it were simply a matter of time.
47 hours later, Dr. Marie Dubois' email arrived like a thunderbolt that would forever change our understanding of reality. Sarah's hands trembled as she opened the message on her laptop while Michael paced behind her in their bedroom, and I slept peacefully down the hall, unaware that my childhood was about to take an extraordinary turn. Dear Mrs. Wellington, the email began, I've spent the last 2 days analyzing your daughter's drawings with growing astonishment. I must be direct with you. What Emma has produced is not the work of imagination, but of memory. Sarah's breath caught in her throat. Michael stopped pacing and leaned over her shoulder to read. The technical details in her sketches match precisely with confidential construction documents that were sealed in the French National Archives until 1987. These include specific modifications to the foundation design that Gustave Eiffel ordered in October 1887, changes that were implemented but never included in the public blueprints. Michael sank into the chair beside Sarah. That's impossible, he whispered. The email continued. More troubling still, Emma's drawing includes a small structural reinforcement near the northeast base, a modification that was suggested by a junior engineer named Henri Moreau, but was rejected by the construction committee as unnecessary. This detail appears in only one document, Henri's personal notebook, which has been in my possession for research purposes and has never been photographed or digitized. Sarah's vision blurred as she read on, her heart pounding so hard she could hear it in her ears. Mrs. Wallington, I must ask you directly, has Emma ever been exposed to Henri Moreau's journal? Has she visited the French National Archives? Because what she has drawn is not merely accurate, it is intimate. It shows the perspective of someone who was present during the construction, someone who understood not just the technical aspects, but the emotional weight of each decision. The final paragraph made Sarah's hands shake so violently that Michael had to take over reading aloud. I have researched Henri Moreau extensively for my doctoral thesis. He was 28 years old when he died in a construction accident on March 15, 1888, just months before the tower's completion. According to period records, he was engaged to a woman named Marguerite Rousseau. He was known among his colleagues for humming old French folk songs while he worked, melodies that his grandmother had taught him as a child. Michael's voice croaked as he finished. Mrs. Wellington, I believe we need to speak by telephone immediately. What your daughter knows should be impossible, but the evidence before me suggests otherwise. I will be available at any time that is convenient for your family. That evening, during a video call that stretched past midnight, Dr. Dubois showed them Henri's photograph from the Eiffel Tower construction archives. The image was grainy and faded, but it showed a young man with kind eyes and a gentle smile, wearing work clothes covered in metal dust. When they showed the photograph to me the next morning, I clapped my hands together with pure joy. That's Henri! That's me! But why do I look so different, and why am I so tall? Dr. Dubois, who had been listening to the video call, went completely silent. Then, in a voice barely above a whisper, she said, Mrs. Wellington, there is something else you should know about Henri Moreau. According to his supervisor's notes, he had an unusual habit of referring to the Eiffel Tower as my tower, the same phrase Emma uses. In the folk song your daughter hums, I recognized it immediately. It's called La Tour de mes rêves, the Tower of My Dreams. It was Henri's grandmother's favorite lullaby. The room fell silent except for the sound of my humming as I colored, completely oblivious to the earth-shattering implications of what we had just learned. There's one more thing, Dr. Dubois continued, her voice now filled with a mixture of scientific fascination and genuine concern. According to historical records, Henri Moreau's last words, spoken to his fiancée Marguerite as he lay dying, were,
I will find you again. I will finish our tower and I will find you again. That night, as my parents struggled to process this impossible reality, I had the most vivid dream yet. I was standing on scaffolding high above Paris, the wind whipping through my hair as I watched the sun set behind the growing iron lattice of our magnificent tower. And somewhere in the distance, I could hear Marguerite's voice calling my name. Not Emma, but Henri.
The memories began flooding back with a vengeance after Dr. Dubois' confirmation. What had once been peaceful dreams of construction and camaraderie transformed into something far more intense and heartbreaking. I would wake up crying, not with the simple tears of a 4-year-old, but with the deep, soul-crushing grief of a man who had lost everything. "Marguerite," I would whisper into the darkness of my pink bedroom, surrounded by stuffed animals and picture books that suddenly felt foreign to me. "Where is Marguerite?" Sarah would find me sitting up in bed, staring at the wall with eyes that held decades of longing. She would hold me close, feeling helpless as I sobbed for a woman I had never met in this lifetime, speaking of a love that transcended death itself. "She has the most beautiful eyes, Mama," I told her one morning over breakfast, my small voice heavy with adult emotion. "Like chocolat au lait, coffee with cream. And when she smiles, it's like the sun coming out after a storm. I was going to marry her after the tower was finished." Michael nearly choked on his coffee. "Emma, sweetheart, you're 4 years old. You can't remember being married." But I shook my head with the certainty of someone who had lived through heartbreak. "I wasn't married yet, Papa. That's why it hurts so much. I died before I could marry her. I died before I could tell her how the tower would have been our wedding gift to the world. Something beautiful that would last forever, like our love was supposed to." The memories weren't just about Marguerite, though she remained the center of the ache in my chest that felt too big for my small body. I remembered Henry's dreams with startling clarity, his vision of creating structures that would inspire hope in people's hearts, buildings that would make strangers look up and believe in human possibility. "I wanted to build a bridge next," I told Dr. Dubois during one of our regular video calls, which had become a lifeline for our family as they struggled to understand my condition. "Not just any bridge, one that would span the Seine like a ribbon of light." I had the plans drawn up, but they were in my apartment when... My voice trailed off, and I touched my chest where, in Henri's memories, a fallen beam had crushed his ribs. Dr. Dubois leaned forward on her computer screen, her scholarly excitement tempered by genuine concern for my well-being. "Emma, can you tell me about Henri's apartment? What did it look like?" The answer flowed from me like water from a broken dam. "3rd floor, number 12 Rue de Rivoli, one room with windows facing east so I could watch the sunrise while I worked on my drawings. I had a small wooden desk that belonged to my father, and above it, I kept a photograph of Marguerite in a silver frame that she gave me for my birthday. She wore a blue dress the day she gave it to me. She said the frame was silver like the moonlight, and that way she could watch over my dreams even when she wasn't with me." Sarah wiped tears from her eyes as she listened to me speak of a love story that had ended more than a century ago. But it was Michael who asked the question that haunted them both. "Emma, do you remember how Henry died?" The room fell silent except for the ticking of the grandfather clock in our hallway. I looked down at my small hands, and for a moment I could see them as they once were, larger, stronger, calloused from years of working with iron and steel. "It was raining," I whispered. "The metal was slippery, and I was rushing because Marguerite was waiting for me. We were supposed to meet for dinner, and I had something important to tell her." I looked up at my parents with eyes that seemed to carry the weight of unfinished business. "I was going to ask her if she wanted to see the tower at sunset the next day, from the very top. I was going to propose to her there, where we could see all of Paris spread out below us like a promise." My voice broke completely then. But the beam fell, and I never got to tell her. I never got to ask her to marry me. I never got to see our tower completed. That night, Sarah found me standing at my bedroom window, pressing my small palm against the glass as I stared up at the stars.
"What are you doing, sweetheart?" she asked gently. "Watching for Marguerite," I replied without turning around. "Henry promised he would find her again. I have to keep watching so I don't miss her when she comes back." Sarah's heart broke as she realized that her 4-year-old daughter was carrying the unfulfilled love and promises of a man who had died before she was even born, and there was nothing she could do to ease that ancient pain.
The decision to travel to Paris came after a particularly difficult night when I had cried for 3 hours straight, calling out for Marguerite in a mixture of English and French that I had never learned. Sarah found me drawing frantically at 2 a.m., my small hands creating detailed sketches of a woman's face, always the same face with those coffee cream eyes and a smile that seemed to radiate warmth even from pencil lines on paper. "We have to find her," I told my parents the next morning, my voice carrying a desperation that no child should ever feel. "She's waiting for me. She's been waiting for so long, and she doesn't know what happened to Henri. She doesn't know why I never came to dinner that night." Michael had used up most of his vacation days and taken an unpaid leave from his law firm. Sarah had resigned from her position at the local library. They had liquidated their savings account and borrowed against their mortgage to make this trip possible, driven by the growing certainty that their daughter's anguish would only continue until Henri's story found its resolution. Dr. Dubois met us at Charles de Gaulle Airport on a gray March morning that felt heavy with possibility. She embraced Sarah like an old friend, though they had only spoken through computer screens, and when she knelt down to my level, her eyes filled with tears. "Bonjour, Emma," she said softly in French. "Bonjour, Dr. Dubois," I replied in the same language, though I had never studied French. "Merci beaucoup for helping us find Marguerite." Dr. Dubois' hand trembled as she touched my cheek. "Mon Dieu," she whispered. "Your accent, it's perfect 19th century Parisian France, exactly as Henri would have spoken." Our first stop was the French National Archives, an imposing building that seemed to hold centuries of secrets within its walls. As we walked through the research rooms filled with ancient documents and hushed scholars, I felt a strange familiarity, as if Henri had spent time in places like this, studying and planning and dreaming of architectural marvels yet to be built. Dr. Dubois had spent weeks preparing for our visit, gathering every document that mentioned Marguerite Rousseau. The archivist, a thin man with kind eyes named Philippe, spread the papers across a wooden table with the reverence of someone handling sacred relics. "Marguerite Rousseau," Philippe began, reading from a faded document, "born Mayfeld, 1862, daughter of Claude and Marie Rousseau. She was 26 when Henri Moreau died, working as a seamstress in the 7th arrondissement." I leaned over the table studying a photograph that showed a young woman with elaborate hair in a high-collared dress. Even in the sepia tones of the old photograph, I could see those eyes that had haunted my dreams. "That's her," I whispered, my small finger tracing the outline of her face on the glass-covered photograph. "That's my Marguerite." Philippe continued reading, his voice growing softer as he shared the tragic details. "After Henri Moreau's death, Marguerite never married. According to parish records, she spent several months in deep mourning, refusing to see visitors. Then, in September 1888, she entered the convent of St. Catherine to become a nun." My heart, Henri's heart, felt like it was breaking all over again. "A nun?" I asked, my voice barely audible. "She dedicated her life to caring for orphan children," Dr. Dubois explained gently. "The records show that she founded a small orphanage in Montmartre in 1895, where she worked until her death in 1954. She was known as Sister Marguerite, and all the children called her Maman Marie because of her endless kindness." I began to cry then, but they weren't tears of sadness. They were tears of something closer to pride. Even in her grief, even after losing Henri, Marguerite had chosen to dedicate her life to love and care. She had transformed her broken heart into a source of healing for children who had no one else. "Where is she buried?" I asked through my tears. Philippe consulted another document, Père Lachaise Cemetery, in the section reserved for religious sisters, plot number 347, under a simple stone cross. Dr. Dubois squeezed Sarah's hand. "Would you like to visit her grave?" I nodded without hesitation, though I wasn't sure what I expected to find there.
Perhaps some sense of closure for Henri's restless soul, or maybe just the chance to finally tell Marguerite why he never came to dinner that rainy March evening in 1888. As we prepared to leave the archives, I turned back to the photograph one more time. In the fading afternoon light streaming through the tall windows, I could have sworn I saw Marguerite's image smile, just slightly, as if she somehow knew that after 136 years of waiting, Henri was finally coming to find her. "Don't worry, ma chérie," I whispered to the photograph in French that flowed naturally from my lips. "I'm coming. Henri is coming home." Outside, the Paris streets bustled with modern life, but as our taxi wound through the city towards Père Lachaise Cemetery, I felt like I was traveling not just through space, but through time itself, moving steadily toward a reunion that had been 136 years in the making.
Storyteller. Père Lachaise Cemetery stretched before us like a city of the dead, its cobblestone paths winding between elaborate tombs and simple grave markers that told the stories of centuries of Parisian lives. The March afternoon was growing cold, and a light mist hung in the air, making the ancient cemetery feel even more ethereal and otherworldly. I walked between my parents, my small hand gripping Sarah's tightly, while Dr. Dubois led us through the maze of graves using a hand-drawn map provided by the cemetery office. The weight of anticipation pressed down on all of us. What would we find at Marguerite's grave? What would this moment mean for Henri's restless soul that lived within my 4-year-old heart? "It should be just around this corner," Dr. Dubois said softly, her voice barely above a whisper in the sacred silence of the cemetery. As we rounded a bend in the path, I stopped so suddenly that Michael nearly stumbled over me. There, about 30 feet away, I could see a simple stone cross marking a grave, and beside it, an elderly woman was kneeling, carefully tending to a small garden of white roses that seemed to glow in the misty light. "There's someone there," Sarah whispered, but I was already walking toward the grave, drawn by a force I couldn't explain. The elderly woman looked up as I approached, and when our eyes met, the world seemed to stop spinning on its axis. She was perhaps 80 years old, with silver hair pulled back in a simple bun, and eyes that were the exact shade of coffee with cream that I had been dreaming about for months. But it wasn't just the color of her eyes. It was the soul looking out through them that made my breath catch in my throat. "Marguerite?" I whispered, and the word came out in Henri's voice, deeper, more mature than my usual child's tone. The woman's weathered hands flew to her heart and tears began streaming down her cheeks. "Mon Dieu! Henri? Mon cher Henri, is it really you?" I nodded, unable to speak, as emotions too large for my small body crashed over me like waves. This was her, not in the young body I remembered, but her soul was unchanged, her essence exactly as Henri had loved her more than a century ago. "I've been waiting for you," she said, rising slowly from her knees and approaching me with trembling steps. "Every day for so many years, I've been coming here to tend the roses and wait for you. I knew you would find me eventually." Sarah and Michael stood frozen behind me, watching their 4-year-old daughter have a conversation that defied every law of reality they had ever known. Dr. Dubois was openly weeping, her camera hanging forgotten around her neck as she witnessed what might have been the most extraordinary moment in the history of human experience. "I tried to come to dinner that night," I said, my voice breaking with Henri's decades of guilt and regret. "I wanted to ask you to marry me at the top of our tower. I had it all planned. We would watch the sunset over Paris, and I would tell you that I wanted to build a whole world of beautiful things with you." The elderly woman, Marguerite's soul in a different lifetime, knelt down so I was at her eye level and gently cupped my small face in her hands. Her touch felt like coming home after the longest journey imaginable. "Je sais, mon amour. I know. I've always known. The night you died, I felt your soul calling to me. I felt your love reaching across the darkness, promising that death couldn't separate us forever." She gestured toward the simple grave marker behind her. "This isn't my grave, mon cher Henri. This is where they buried the body of the woman I was in that lifetime, Sister Marguerite, who died in 1954. But I didn't die. I came back, just as you did. I've been living as Colette Moreau,
Yes, I chose your surname when I was reborn, as if somehow I always knew we would find each other again. My heart felt like it might burst with joy and relief and love so powerful it could move mountains. You waited for me, I said, and it wasn't a question. Of course I waited, Colette smiled, and it was Marguerite's smile, unchanged by decades and different faces. Love like ours doesn't end with death. It just finds new ways to exist, new forms to take. I've been searching for you my whole life, and when I heard about a little American girl who knew secrets about the Eiffel Tower construction, I knew you had finally come home to me. Behind us, Sarah was sobbing openly, while Michael stood with his mouth agape trying to process what he was witnessing. Dr. Dubois was frantically scribbling notes, her scientific mind struggling to document what couldn't possibly be real, but undeniably was. As the mist began to thicken around us in the growing dusk, Colette took my small hand in her aged one, and for a moment I could feel the echo of all our lifetimes, past and future, stretching out like threads in an infinite tapestry of love that time could never unravel. What happens now? I asked, and for the first time since the memories began, Henri's voice in my head was peaceful rather than anguished. Colette's eyes sparkled with the same mischief I remembered from 1888. Now, my darling, we finish what we started.
Colette invited us back to her small apartment in Montmartre, just a few blocks from where the original orphanage had stood more than a century ago. As we climbed the narrow stairs to her third-floor home, I felt Henri's memories stirring. This neighborhood, these winding streets, the very rhythm of Paris itself felt like returning to a childhood home after decades of exile. Her apartment was modest, but filled with an extraordinary collection of architectural drawings, photographs of bridges and towers from around the world, and most remarkably, dozens of notebooks filled with detailed sketches that looked hauntingly familiar. "I've been drawing them my whole life," Colette explained as she prepared tea with trembling hands that betrayed her excitement. "Buildings that don't exist, bridges that span rivers I've never seen, towers that reach towards stars I can't name. My friends always thought I was eccentric, but I knew I was remembering something important." She opened one of the notebooks, and I gasped. There, drawn in a different hand but with identical vision, were the very bridges and monuments that Henri had dreamed of building. The span across the Seine that would look like a ribbon of light, the healing gardens he wanted to create in the heart of the city, even the small memorial chapel he had once sketched for his grandmother. "You remember all of it," I whispered, running my small fingers over drawings that perfectly matched the dreams I carried. "I remember everything, mon cher," Colette said, settling into the chair across from me. "But more than that, I understand now why we both came back. We have work to finish, not just Henri and Marguerite's love story, but Henri's vision of creating beauty that heals the world." Sarah and Michael sat quietly in the corner of the room, holding hands and watching their daughter have a conversation about lifetimes and purposes that challenged everything they thought they knew about existence. Dr. Dubois had given up any pretense of scientific objectivity and was simply listening with wonder to two souls recognizing their eternal connection. "Tell me about your life," I said to Colette, hungry for all the years we had missed. "Tell me about Marguerite's life after Henri died." Colette's eyes grew distant as she accessed memories that spanned more than a century. Sister Marguerite was heartbroken, yes, but she chose to transform that pain into something beautiful. The orphanage wasn't just a place for children to live, it was designed like one of Henri's healing spaces. High ceilings, lots of windows, gardens where children could play and grow and dream. She showed me a faded photograph of a group of children playing in a courtyard surrounded by flowering vines and carefully designed stone pathways that created natural gathering spaces. Every child who lived there grew up feeling loved and valued, feeling like they could build something beautiful with their own lives. Many became artists, teachers, builders, people who create rather than destroy. That was Henri's vision living through Marguerite's hands. I felt tears sliding down my cheeks, but they weren't tears of sadness anymore. They were tears of recognition and completion. "And in this lifetime," I asked, In this lifetime, Colette smiled, I became a teacher, just as you suspected I might. For 50 years, I taught architecture and design at the École des Beaux-Arts. I've had hundreds of students who are now building beautiful things all over the world. Bridges that connect divided communities, hospitals designed to help people heal faster, schools that inspire children to dream bigger dreams. She leaned forward and took my small hands in her weathered ones. Henri's vision of creating structures that inspire hope? I've been living that vision through my students for half a century, waiting for you to come back so we could do even more. But you're old now, and I'm just a little girl. How can we build anything together? Colette's laughter filled the room like music. Oh, my darling Henri, don't you see? This lifetime isn't about us being lovers again. It's about being something even more powerful. You're going to grow up with Henri's knowledge and vision, but with Emma's fresh perspective and modern understanding. And I'm going to be your teacher, your guide, your partner in creating the most beautiful things this world has ever seen. She gestured toward her notebooks filled with architectural dreams. We have decades ahead of us to design healing spaces, to teach others how buildings can nurture human souls, to create beauty that will outlast our bodies, just as the Eiffel Tower has outlasted Henri and Marguerite. As the evening light faded over Paris, I understood finally why Henri's soul had chosen to return in this small American girl's body and why Marguerite had spent a lifetime preparing for this reunion. We weren't meant to recapture what we lost. We were meant to build something entirely new, something that could only exist because of all we had learned through love and loss and the patient work of healing. When do we start? I asked, and both Henri's determination and Emma's excitement rang in my voice. Colette's eyes sparkled with the same light I remembered from their first meeting in 1887. We already have, mon cher.
This transformation didn't happen overnight, but it began that very evening in Colette's apartment overlooking the twinkling lights of Paris. For the first time since the memories began flooding back, I felt the heavy weight of Henri's grief and longing begin to lift from my small shoulders, replaced by something infinitely more powerful: purpose. Colette spent the next 3 days with our family, and during those precious hours, she helped me understand that the pain I had been carrying wasn't meant to be a burden. It was meant to be fuel for something beautiful. She showed me how to transform Henri's unfinished love into a love for all humanity, channeling his desire to build monuments to romance into a vision of creating spaces that would heal hearts everywhere. "Look at this," she said on our second day together, spreading out a map of modern Paris on her kitchen table. "See how many places in this city make people feel small or forgotten or alone? The subway stations that feel like underground prisons, the housing projects that steal people's dignity, the hospitals that frighten children instead of comforting them." I studied the map with Henri's architectural eye and Emma's 4-year-old compassion, and suddenly I could see what she meant. "They're all wrong," I said, pointing to various locations. "They don't help people feel loved." "Exactly." Colette's enthusiasm was infectious. "And that's our work. Henri, Emma, our beautiful, brilliant child. We are going to spend the rest of our lives fixing that. We are going to create spaces that make every person who enters them feel valued and hopeful and connected to something larger than themselves." That afternoon, she took us to visit the original site of Sister Margaret's orphanage. The building was gone, replaced by a modern apartment complex, but Colette had brought photographs of the original structure and floor plans she had drawn from Margaret's memories. "See how she designed the children's bedrooms?" She pointed to the drawings. Each one had a window position so that when they woke up, the first thing they would see was either the garden or the sky. Never a wall, never another building blocking their view. She wanted them to wake up every morning believing in possibility. Standing there, in the courtyard where dozens of orphan children had once played and grown and learned to dream, I felt the final pieces of Henri's restless soul settling into peace. Margaret hadn't just survived his loss,
She had transformed it into a lifetime of nurturing love that had touched hundreds of lives. I'm not sad anymore, I told my parents that evening as we prepared for our return flight to Ohio. Henri's not sad anymore. Sarah knelt down to my level, her eyes still showing traces of the wonder and confusion she'd been carrying since this journey began. How do you feel, sweetheart? I considered the question carefully, feeling around inside myself for the emotions that had been so overwhelming just days before. I feel ready, I said finally, ready to build something beautiful. Michael, who had been the most skeptical member of our family about the whole impossible situation, sat down beside us. Emma, do you understand that you're still just 4 years old? You can't actually build buildings yet. I smiled at him with a patience that belonged to someone much older. I know, Papa, but Colette explained it to me. First, I have to grow up and learn everything Emma needs to learn, how to read and write and do mathematics, and understand how the modern world works. But while I'm learning all those things, Henri's knowledge will be getting stronger too, like a plant that grows bigger when you water it. Dr. Dubois, who had been documenting our entire experience for what she was already calling the most remarkable case study in the history of psychology and parapsychology, looked up from her notes. And what will you do with that knowledge, Emma? I'm going to design healing gardens for hospitals so sick children don't feel scared, I said with the certainty of someone who had found their life's purpose, and schools that make every student feel special and smart, and bridges that don't just connect two places, but connect people's hearts. I paused, remembering something Colette had told me. She said that Henri always wanted his buildings to make people look up and believe in human possibility. So that's what I'm going to do. I'm going to create spaces that remind people how beautiful they are, how much love they're capable of, how many wonderful things they can build together. That night, for the first time in months, I slept peacefully without dreams of falling beams or unfinished proposals. Instead, I dreamed of gardens filled with laughing children, of bridges that sparkled like jewelry across rivers, and of buildings that seemed to sing with the voices of everyone who had ever felt hopeful while standing inside them. Henri's grief had transformed into Emma's purpose, and somewhere in the space between past and future, two souls had found the healing they had been seeking across more than a century of separation. The tower of their love would finally be completed, not in iron and steel, but in every structure that would ever again make a human heart feel less alone.
6 months after our return from Paris, I received a letter that would change the trajectory of our entire family's life. It arrived on a sunny October morning, written in Colette's elegant handwriting on cream-colored paper that smelled faintly of lavender and old books. Ma chère Emma, the letter began, I have something important to share with you. Something I wasn't ready to tell you when we first met because I wanted our reunion to be filled only with joy, not shadowed by what is to come. Sarah read the letter aloud to me as I sat at the same kitchen table where this whole journey had begun with my first drawing of the Eiffel Tower. My parents had learned to navigate the strange reality of having a daughter who carried the memories and wisdom of a 19th century engineer, but they still struggled sometimes with the weight of it all. The doctors have told me that I have cancer, Colette's letter continued, and that I likely have only a few months remaining in this lifetime. But please don't be sad, mon petit Henri, because I am not sad. You see, I finally understand why I had to wait so long for you to return, and why this particular timing was always part of our destiny. My small hands gripped the edge of the table as Sarah's voice wavered with emotion. The thought of losing Colette again, just when we had found each other, made Henri's heart ache within my chest. For the past 40 years, I have been writing in journals, not just architectural drawings, but detailed plans for something I always knew you and I would build together someday. I have documented every healing space I ever dreamed of, every technique I learned for designing buildings that nurture human souls, every innovative approach I developed through decades of teaching young architects.
Sarah paused in her reading, looking at me with eyes that held both wonder and concern. "There's more, sweetheart. Are you ready to hear the rest?" I nodded, though part of me already knew what Colette was about to reveal. "I am sending you 27 journals filled with our life's work, the complete architectural philosophy that Henri and Marguerite were meant to develop together. These are not just ideas, Emma. They are detailed blueprints for revolutionary approaches to hospital design, therapeutic gardens, schools that heal trauma through their very structure, and community spaces that help isolated people find connection again." The next part of the letter made my heart race with excitement and purpose. But the most important thing is that I am sending you the legal documents that establish the Henri and Marguerite Foundation for Healing Architecture. I have spent years setting this up, using money I inherited and donations from my former students who are now successful architects around the world. This foundation will fund your education, support your projects, and provide you with everything you need to transform our shared vision into reality. Sarah's voice broke completely as she read the final paragraph. "You see, my darling, I didn't just spend this lifetime waiting for you to return. I spent it preparing the way for the magnificent work you were born to do. When I leave this body, my soul will finally be at peace, knowing that Henri's vision of healing the world through beautiful architecture will live on through Emma's remarkable mind and compassionate heart." Enclosed with the letter was a key and address in New York City. "This opens the door to your foundation office," Colette had written in a postscript, "where everything is waiting for you." That evening, Michael made a phone call that would reshape our entire family's future. Within a week, he had resigned from his law firm, Sarah had begun researching educational programs for gifted children, and we had made plans to move to New York City, where the Henri and Marguerite Foundation awaited. But it was the package that arrived 3 days later that truly took my breath away. 27 leather-bound journals, each one filled with Colette's meticulous handwriting and detailed architectural drawings. When I opened the first volume, I gasped in recognition. Every page contained designs that matched perfectly with visions I had been carrying, but hadn't learned how to express yet. There were plans for hospital wings designed like gardens, with healing colors and natural light patterns that would help patients recover faster. There were school designs that created small, intimate learning spaces within larger buildings, so no child would ever feel lost or invisible. There were community centers that naturally encouraged interaction between different generations and cultures, bringing people together instead of keeping them apart. "She spent decades perfecting these," I whispered, running my small fingers over intricate drawings that represented a lifetime of dedication to our shared mission. "She prepared everything for me." Sarah sat beside me, tears streaming down her face as she watched her 4-year-old daughter absorb architectural knowledge that most professionals would need decades to develop. "Emma, do you understand what this means?" I looked up at her with eyes that held both the wisdom of Henri's experience and the boundless hope of Emma's future. "It means I don't have to figure out how to change the world all by myself," I said simply. "Colette already showed me how. Now I just have to grow up strong enough to do the work." That night, I called Colette in Paris. Her voice was weaker than it had been 6 months earlier, but her joy at hearing from me filled the phone line with warmth. "Did you receive everything, mon cœur?" she asked. "Yes," I said, my voice steady with purpose. "And Colette, thank you for waiting for me. Thank you for preparing everything. Henri's dreams are going to come true because of you." Her laughter was soft and knowing. "No, ma chérie. Henri and Marguerite's dreams are going to come true because of us, past, present, and future, working together across time to build a more beautiful world."
Colette passed away peacefully on a snowy December morning in Paris, just as the first light of dawn touched the windows of her Montmartre apartment. I felt her departure not as a loss, but as a gentle release, like watching a butterfly finally take flight after a long chrysalis. Dr. Dubois called to tell us the news, her voice filled with both sadness and wonder. "She left one final message for you, Emma," Dr. Dubois said through the crackling international connection.
She said to tell you that the work begins now, and that love like yours never truly says goodbye. It just transforms into something even more powerful. I was 6 years old then, having spent 2 years growing into my unusual destiny while my family adjusted to our new life in New York City. The Henri and Marguerite Foundation occupied a beautiful brownstone in Manhattan, its rooms filled with Colette's journals and architectural models, its walls lined with photographs of healing spaces from around the world. My education had become as extraordinary as everything else in our transformed life. Private tutors came to teach me languages, mathematics, and engineering principles, while child psychologists helped me process the unique weight of carrying Henri's memories alongside my own developing personality. But it was the hours I spent in the Foundation's design studio that felt most like home. "Show me what you see," my architecture tutor, Professor Martinez, would say, as we studied photographs of sterile hospital corridors or prison-like school buildings. And I would close my eyes and let Henri's visions flow through Emma's young hands, sketching healing gardens where there were parking lots, drawing skylights where there were concrete ceilings, imagining spaces that whispered to every person who entered them, "You matter. You are loved. You belong here." By my 7th birthday, I had designed my first real project, a children's wing for Mount Sinai Hospital that would revolutionize pediatric care. The rooms were arranged like flower petals around a central garden courtyard, with each patient room featuring windows positioned to catch morning sunlight and evening stars. The corridors curved gently like rivers, painted in colors that research had shown to reduce anxiety and promote healing. "It's remarkable," the hospital's chief architect said as he studied my drawings. "The design principles are sophisticated beyond anything I've seen. Yet there's something almost intuitive about how the spaces flow together. It's as if whoever created this understands something fundamental about how architecture affects the human soul." I smiled, remembering Colette's words about buildings that help people believe in human possibility. "That's exactly right," I said. The construction of Emma's Garden, as the hospital wing came to be known, took 2 years to complete. On the day it opened, Sarah and Michael stood with me in the central courtyard, watching children in wheelchairs and hospital gowns laugh as they played among the specially designed therapeutic plants and interactive water features. "Do you see that little girl by the fountain?" I pointed to a child who couldn't have been more than 4 years old, the same age I had been when this journey began. "Yesterday, she was so scared of her surgery that she wouldn't speak to anyone. But look at her now." The little girl was giggling as she touched the fountain's gentle sprays, her face bright with wonder instead of fear. Around her, other children were discovering hidden reading nooks, art stations positioned to catch perfect natural light, and quiet meditation spaces where worried parents could find moments of peace. "Henri would be proud," Sarah said softly, tears streaming down her face. "Henri is proud," I corrected gently. "And so is Marguerite. They're both here, and every child who feels safe and loved in these spaces."
Over the years, the Henri and Marguerite Foundation grew into something neither Henri nor Marguerite could have imagined in their original 19th century lifetime. We designed schools that helped traumatized children heal through architecture itself, buildings that created natural gathering spaces for shy students, quiet refuges for overwhelmed minds, and bright open areas that encouraged creativity and collaboration. We created community centers in divided neighborhoods, structures that seemed to naturally draw people together across racial, cultural, and economic lines. We pioneered therapeutic garden designs for nursing homes, making the final years of life feel like a gentle embrace rather than a warehouse for the forgotten. But perhaps most importantly, we trained other architects in what we called healing design principles, teaching them how to create spaces that nurtured human dignity, encouraged connection, and reminded every person who entered them of their inherent worth. By my 12th birthday, I had established scholarship programs at architecture schools around the world, all focused on designing for human flourishing rather than mere function.
Hundreds of Henri and Marguerite fellows were studying in universities across 6 continents, learning to build bridges not just across rivers, but across the divides that separate human hearts. "Look at this," I told Sarah one evening as we reviewed applications for our latest fellowship program. "This young woman in Kenya wants to design HIV treatment centers that feel like places of hope instead of shame. This man in Brazil is developing housing for the homeless that preserves dignity while providing shelter. This student in Tokyo is creating senior centers that help elderly people feel valued instead of invisible." Sarah shook her head in amazement, as she had done countless times over the years. "Emma, do you understand what you've created? Henri's vision of inspiring hope through architecture, it's spreading across the entire world." I smiled, feeling the presence of both Henri and Marguerite in the warm satisfaction that filled my chest. That was always the plan. Love multiplies when you give it away. Henri and Marguerite's love couldn't be contained in just one lifetime, or even 2 lifetimes. It needed to become big enough to heal the whole world. As I grew older, I never stopped feeling the wonder of carrying Henri's memories while living Emma's life. Sometimes I would stand in the completed buildings we had designed and feel the echo of that 19th century engineer's dreams made manifest in steel and glass and healing stone. Other times I would touch one of Colette's journals and feel Marguerite's patient love flowing through decades of preparation and hope. On my 16th birthday, I received one final gift from Colette. A letter that had been sealed and held by her attorney for 7 years, with instructions to deliver it only when I was old enough to understand its full meaning. "Ma très chère Emma," the letter began. "If you are reading this, then our impossible love story has become something even more beautiful than Henri and Marguerite ever dared to dream. You have taken the pain of separation and transformed it into healing for thousands. You have taken the grief of unfinished love and made it into a foundation for infinite love." The letter continued, "I want you to know that every building you design, every space you create that helps someone feel less alone, every moment you spend teaching others to build with love instead of just skill, all of this is our dance, Henri. It is Marguerite and Henri's eternal waltz, played out across time and space and the infinite architecture of human compassion." I finished reading the letter in the rooftop garden of our foundation building, surrounded by the lights of New York City twinkling like earthbound stars. In the distance, I could see some of the buildings that had been designed using our healing principles, spaces where children were learning to dream, where patients were finding hope, where isolated souls were discovering connection. Henri's tower had finally been completed. Not the single monument he had originally envisioned, but something far grander, a worldwide network of spaces designed to nurture the human spirit. And Marguerite's love had found its perfect expression, not in a single marriage, but in the healing embrace that every person felt when they entered one of our buildings. Some souls, I realized, are meant to love not just each other, but the entire world. Some promises transcend death not by being kept in the same form, but by growing into something infinitely larger and more beautiful than what had been dreamed of. As the stars appeared overhead, I whispered into the night, "Thank you, Henri. Thank you, Marguerite. Thank you, Colette. The tower is finished, and it will stand forever." And somewhere in the space between memory and possibility, between past lives and future dreams, I felt their eternal love transform once more, not into longing or grief or even earthly satisfaction, but into the pure joy of knowing that some stories never end. They just become large enough to hold the whole world's healing.